Good morning. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're really happy to have you. This is a little bit unique because we have a hybrid. It's nice to have a backdrop that isn't just somebody's kitchen wall for once. We're really happy to have Lydia Pagel here with us. She's going to talk about desert animals and their adaptations of home. And she's with this Texas State Parks, but I'm going to turn it over to her because she's the expert.
Thank you so much. So I made this a hybrid program. However, it looks like I don't have any in-person people. So I'm just going to be presenting to the screen today, and to anyone who ends up watching this in the future, welcome to this presentation. My name is Lydia Pagel. I'm a park ranger at Franklin Mountain State Park. I'm out here in the beautiful Franklin Mountain State Park right now at our amphitheater at the Visitor Center. I'm going to be doing this presentation today about how animals use the environment to create homes for themselves, and kind of tying that into some further ideas that we've been discussing at the Environmental Summit this year. So welcome, thank you. I would like to apologize to everyone, I'm having a little bit of an asthma issue right now, so I am going to cough a little bit possibly during the presentation. I'm really sorry, but don't worry, it's not contagious. As far as I know, you can't get asthma from me. Welcome. And so just to start out, let's think about what is a home and how do animals see a home. A lot of times when we're talking about animals and their surroundings and their needs, we talk about a couple different basic survival needs that animals have and that people have as well. And those break down into 4 different things. We have water, food, shelter, and air. And depending on which one of those 4 is at most has the least availability to animals, that determines how well a group of animals can survive in an area, or how many animals can survive in an area. So generally speaking, air is not going to be one of those limiting factors. For the most part, in most environments, with a few exceptions, air is not limiting. We have plenty of air to breathe. Like I said, except for a few exceptions. So the other 3 that we focus on a lot are going to be water, food, and shelter. So we're going to be talking about shelter today. So what is shelter, and how do animals in an environment like I'm in today use shelter? Well, there's a couple different things that shelter can do for you. And they primarily break down into 2 different categories. And so that's going to be, shelter is going to protect you from sort of environmental elements, kind of weather events, high heat, in some areas cold, although that's not quite such a big issue here in El Paso, although sometimes it is. Wind, rain, any kind of weather pattern or extreme situation, shelter is going to protect you from those things. The other thing that shelters do potentially is to camouflage an animal. So you'll see different homes as camouflage. It's also a form of protection, but it's going to be hiding instead of sort of insulating, I suppose. So you have camouflage, and then you have other types of protection. And so we're going to talk about different ways that animals do that here in the desert specifically. So we're going to think about a couple different ways, types of homes. I've talked about 2 different things that homes do, but there's also 2 main types of animal homes that we see. One would be sort of a built structure, and one would be a found structure. So we'll talk about found structures first, And they can be really simple. A lot of our animals don't need elaborate shelters. They don't build huge houses like we do. And a found structure can be as simple as a rock to hide under. A rock, maybe a tree, a bush, to kind of sleep under for a short period of time, or to hide in, depending on the animal and what their needs are. But these can be very simple. They're just found objects or plants or structures that an animal will use to shelter in temporarily. Once again, either to camouflage themselves or to protect themselves. And like I said, this can be any sorts of things. This can be a rock, this can be a tree, this can be a bush, but it can also be human-made, man-made structures as well. Well, animals will use anything that they find if they need to as a shelter. But primarily what we're going to be talking about today is going to be made sort of constructed homes. How do animals construct homes? And I think one of the main homes that we think of when we think of constructed homes is going to be this one right here. So you see, I've got this, this is quite an old nest that a bird made. I don't know exactly what kind this particular one was, but this is a bird's nest. It used to be sitting presumably up in a tree, something like that. And this is probably one of the most common types of constructed homes that we think of when we think about animals building homes. You can see at this one, I'm going to try to get in a nice picture there. It's all made of found objects, mostly grass, twigs. However, this one also incorporates some man-made objects as well. This is actually some paper shreds. So I don't know exactly where this bird was, but they found like some shredded paper that had blown off and incorporated that into their nest. And there also appears to be some cotton threads woven in here as well. So these birds will use all sorts of objects. I think a lot of this is actually from yucca stems that has been broken down into the fiber. So this is a lot of yucca fiber in this particular nest. But these are one type of bird's nest. You also see birds making nests out of mud or incorporating other aspects into their nests. But this is kind of what we normally think of when we think of a bird's nest. You know, you've got this leafy, twiggy sort of structure. And this is a pretty common type of home that birds will build. We will see these in trees, on buildings. Some birds do build nests on the ground, but in that situation, they do have to rely a lot more on camouflaging the nest in order to protect the baby birds and the eggs from predation. But since I don't have any in-person people today, I'm going to go ahead and move the computer around just a little bit. I'm going to see if I can show you actually a nest that's currently being used. Candace, I might have to have you help me because I'm not going to be able to see the screen very much.
Sure.
When I hold this up. So if you could tell me if I actually have it angled in the right place, that would be hugely helpful.
Okay.
Let me see if I can get up there.
Oh, yay. Yeah, you can see it.
Is there anyone inside right now?
I don't see any movement. It's hard to tell. No, maybe an egg. Oh, there's one egg.
Oh.
No, maybe two eggs. I see definitely one. Wow, there's eggs.
So that is an example of a bird's nest that's actually built in a man-made structure. I was hoping that some of the babies would be in there. I guess they must have run off already. That nest.
I was really excited about an egg.
That one's actually Say's Phoebe's nest.
Okay.
It's the mom has been hanging out for a while, and actually yesterday 2 of the babies were outside the nest. They had kind of hopped off onto the beam and were just sort of sitting there next to their nest. Apparently they're flying already. They're pretty fuzzy at this point. But that bird's nest is kind of the stereotypical animal home that we think of. And what are some features of that usually? It incorporates mostly natural materials, sometimes incorporating some man-made materials as well, often built from found objects. Oftentimes they're either up high and difficult to get to or very camouflaged so that predators don't see them. And actually, a lot of times the material themselves is nicely insulating. Those kinds of natural fibers and even like this nest over here that I showed you has like some cotton and stuff like that, which is a nice insulating material. But that is actually not the most common type of nest or home, I shouldn't say nest, home that we have out in the desert. Our most common home, sorry about that. The wind's getting in the way of my presentation a little bit. Okay. Excuse me. The most common type of home that we see out here is actually going to be burrows. Most of our animals do live underground, actually. So we see lots of different burrows as you're hiking out in the desert. You can definitely see a lot of different holes in the ground. And I get a lot of questions from people when I'm on hikes and stuff like that. People always want to know what lives there. And I always tell people our holes, our burrows out here are kind of like an apartment building. Someone goes and they build this building one year, and then someone moves in for a year or two, and then they move out, and then someone else moves in, and then someone comes and expands it a little bit, and then we get some new tenants, and it's always changing who's living there. And that's how our burrows work out here. Oftentimes a burrow will start maybe a lizard will burrow a small kind of thin tunnel and live in there for a year. And then as it grows, it might expand it. You'll have mice come in and kind of add some rooms on there. And the mice might live in there for a year. And then maybe the snakes will come in, maybe looking for the mice, and then they'll kind of be in there for a while, and then maybe a larger lizard will come in, and then maybe some of our larger burrows will be used by rabbits or burrowing owls even. And so a lot of our different animals will use these underground burrows. Some of them will build them themselves or expand on other burrows, make them larger. Some of them will only use pre-made structures. Like our burrowing owls, they don't really build their burrows. They use pre-existing ones. And so there's a lot of different animals that use these. But what I wanted to talk about today is, why do animals live underground? Why would they do that? When we think of like wilderness areas, we think about the animals out and about. And actually in the desert, mostly the animals are underground. Why is that? Well, there's a couple different reasons. As you can see behind me, in the desert, it's not like we have a lot of kind of trees or bushes that provide shelter above ground. So if you want to hide from predators, below ground might actually be the better place to go. So that's one reason. Another reason has to do with our heat, and sometimes in the winter, the cold as well. Our temperatures in the desert can change drastically because of the dry air, but underground, once you get about a foot underground, the temperature seems to stay pretty even year round. You've got a nice kind of usually about 68 degrees, 69 degrees, usually 60, upper 60s generally is what you're looking at, depending on how deep you go and where exactly you are. But generally upper 60s year round is what it's going to be. So what does that mean? That means that in the winter, it's nice and warm in a burrow. And in the summer, it's nice and cool because of the contrast between the outside air. It feels that way, even though it's actually the same temperature year round. So it's actually a really great way to maintain a comfortable body temperature year round without having to, like we do, put on extra layers of clothing or take off extra layers or install air conditioning or anything like that. So burrows are actually very comfortable temperature year round. And so that's one of the reasons why our animals do live underground a lot. One of the main reasons, actually. And so what I wanted to do, I've got a few more minutes. This is a pretty short presentation, but I wanted to kind of transition a little bit into talking about, well, how can we learn from the different homes that animals build out here in the desert? A lot of the talks during this summit have been about built houses, sustainable architecture, and stuff like that. And so what aspects of animal homes can we incorporate into our own homes? And I think there's a couple of different things that we can think about. The first one is that animals tend to use pre-existing found objects when they build or make themselves more comfortable in their homes. A lot of times what humans do is we harvest new materials, we make new materials, and we build from scratch. But if we reuse things that are already made, that can be much more cost effective and efficient and sustainable for us in the long term. So the first thing is to use pre-existing objects instead of making new ones. And the second one is to use natural building materials or natural materials in our home spaces. And this has a number of different benefits. And I'm sure a lot of the other presentations at this summit have gone into more detail about a lot of these things, so I'm going to be pretty brief. But I see two main benefits to incorporating natural materials into your home, whether that's actual building material in the walls or whether it's just having plants and other things around your home. The first one would be that it is actually really calming for humans to be surrounded by nature. And so if you have like plants and things in your home, not only are the plants going to clean the air that you breathe, but they're also just going to make you more comfortable and actually decrease your overall stress and increase your feeling of happiness and well-being. However, by using natural materials in the actual construction of your home or in certain key parts of your home, you can actually build a home that's much more efficient and needs less kind of air conditioning and heating and kind of energy input, so to speak. And so those are kind of the main things that I think of when I'm thinking about like, okay, how can I live more sustainably and what can I learn from animal adaptations of home? Now, I did want to give a few minutes. I've got 5 more minutes left in this presentation. I just wanted to see if we have, I can't see the screen very well.
You want me to read the questions?
I'm noticing that there's some stuff popping up. Sure, can you read some questions out?
Yeah, so I think it was a little while back. They asked, what advice do you have if we find a fallen bird's nest or babies out of the nest?
Yeah, so for the most part, what I tell people is leave it be. So first of all, if you just find a nest that's fallen, similar to this one here, if it's empty like this, there's a good chance that this is an old nest that just fell down. So you don't really need to do anything with it. You can leave it, and then in the future, birds can kind of grab that same material to build new nests, etc. If you find the babies, I would say leave them be. A lot of times the mom is close by, and so don't necessarily assume that they are in distress because they are not in the nest. Most likely the mom is nearby. She'll be coming by to help them out. If they have fallen, don't try to pick them up, don't touch them, just leave them there. If you do feel like they are injured and need assistance, call someplace like the Stickhouse Sanctuary. I think they did a presentation for the Environmental Summit as well, and leave it to someone like that to help rescue a bird. But for the most part, leave it be.
Okay, perfect. And then the next question is, do you have the burrowing owls homes that Lois presented about there?
We actually don't have any burrowing owls homes here in the park. Actually, most of those are outside the park or in different kind of protected lands closer to the river, actually. But burrowing owls, actually, there's a lot of them closer to human habitation, actually. Anyways, we don't have any burrowing owl homes here in the park. The ones that Lois works on are more down closer to the river.
Oh, okay. And then when you were talking about the climate control, it just reminded me of the Earthships. Like, it's almost replicating it.
That's a really cool thing, because basically, if you think about it, our animals out here, they live in Earthships. They don't look like, the Earthships that we've been seeing, but they are essentially Earthships.
And then you have a comment in the chat. It says, "I love how you brought it back to how we live or should live."
Cool. I always like to build in those connections.
Yes.
Because a lot of times we have this idea that like nature and the human world are these two different separate things, and they're not. They're not. They're all together, and there's a lot that we can learn from nature. And there's actually a lot of really cool things that have been developed by mimicking nature in engineering. If you're interested in that, bioengineering is a really cool field where they use observations of the natural world to solve engineering problems with technology. So an example is actually with bullet trains. There's a lot of difficulties in making a train that goes as fast as bullet trains do. And they've actually looked at a lot of different animal structures in order to design them. So one of the problems is that, friction is a problem just generally, but also when those bullet trains go through tunnels and stuff, the amount of air that's being kind of pushed actually can create a sonic boom. And so in order to prevent that, the nose of the bullet train is modeled after the shape of a kingfisher bill, which the kingfishers dive into water at fairly high speeds, and they're able to hit the water without causing major damage to themselves at those high speeds because of the shape of their bill. And so that shape was incorporated into the nose of those bullet trains in order to make it go through more aerodynamically without creating that sonic boom. And then the part, I'm not an engineer, guys, so I don't know the names of all the train parts. But there's another part of the train that was actually modeled after owl wing feathers. So owls are some of the most silent flyers, and because of the way their down feathers work. And so they incorporated some ideas from that into this connection point on the train to make it glide smoother.
That's amazing. Can you imagine if that's your job, is just to study the animals and then do that? That's really cool. What was it called, that field?
Bioengineering.
Engineering. I feel like I want to look it up because it's just interesting. I mean, I even know like studying Da Vinci, like in his sketchbooks, he really did research like birds and, you know, I know he created war machines and stuff, but I mean, it's fascinating, his sketches.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Lydia. I can't wait for your hike. I'm definitely gonna be there because I'm watching you right now being outdoors and I'm jealous because I'm stuck at my kitchen table.
I look forward to having you right out in person and showing you some of our animal burrows and other stuff that we have out here.
Yes, I'm hoping that. Do you see tarantulas sometimes?
Yeah, tarantulas we see more often kind of in actually going into the fall.
Okay.
Their season to see them is going to be around October-ish. That's their mating season. So that's when you see the males out and about and strutting their stuff. So
Perfect.
we might not see any tarantulas, but we might.
Well, thank you so much for all this information. I'm so glad we have this, and thank you guys for attending, and you have a wonderful Sunday. Bye.